George Belichick here with Zach Cox from Gillette Stadium, where locker room cleanout day came much earlier for the Patriots than owner Robert Kraft wanted or expected, but some of us saw coming back to the offseason and the summer with the offensive coaching hires. But Zach, a lot of changes need to be made to make the Patriots competitive again, offensively, special teams, personnel wise. What do you see as a top priority heading into the offseason now for New England?
The number one priority is fixing this offensive coaching setup that you mentioned. It was controversial at the time. A lot of people questioned the validity of having Matt Patricia and Joe Judge lead the Patriots offense in roles that they had never filled in their careers. And those second guesses, I mean, I guess they aren't even second guesses. They were first guesses. Those guesses were correct. This setup did not work for the Patriots this season. It was their single biggest issue. I think it really wasted a year of Mac Jones. It squandered a lot of offensive talent that they have. It certainly squandered a great season from the Patriots defense. So fixing that has to be their number one priority, and it has to be their most immediate priority as well, because we can get into all the free agents and all the potential personnel changes they'll have. But if you want to find an accomplished, proven offensive coordinator, those guys get hired pretty quickly after the season. That's not something the Patriots are going to be able to wait until April to figure out. If they want to bring in a Bill O'Brien or a Chad O'Shea, maybe a Cliff Kingsbury if you want to go a little bit outside of the box, those guys are going to get scooped up pretty quickly. So that's something Bill Belichick and his staff are going to need to lock down within really the next couple of weeks, probably before the Super Bowl. Ideally, for a Patriots perspective, they would have that matter settled by maybe the end of January, mid-February. That's something that's going to have to happen soon.
And I mean, that'll go into draft prep. You get
Yep.
your guys in this building now. They know the players they want to get and how to address it. As we also saw, Gerard Mayo's name already floating around for interviews. He wants to be a head coach, doesn't have the DC title. Naturally, this coaching staff I feel like it could sort itself out. Matt Patricia can slide to DC. Joe Judge can help special teams, and Belichick seems like he could hire elsewhere.
Yeah, there certainly seems to be a kind of obvious sliding door type situation where you move Matt Patricia and Joe Judge. If Bill Belichick wants to keep them on staff, put them in roles that are maybe a little bit more commensurate with what their experience is. And then Bill O'Brien just seems like such an obvious candidate for this Patriots offensive coordinator job, though it does seem like he will have interest from other NFL teams. So again, something that the Patriots are going to have to figure out sooner rather than later.
Yeah, dragging their feet won't work. Now, you mentioned free agents that are pending. We spoke to one today, Jacoby Myers, other notable names, Jonathan Jones, Jabril Peppers. Out of those free agents, who has to be the guy they need to make sure they get back in this building?
I think it makes a lot of sense to bring back Jacoby Myers because he has been the Patriots' best wide receiver, their most productive wide receiver for 3 consecutive seasons. They keep bringing in other players to try to sort of usurp him on that depth chart. None of them have been able to do that. Maybe that says more about the players that they've brought in than about Myers himself, but he has been one of their better players for the last couple of seasons. Going to be very interesting, though, to see what his market looks like, because this is the weakest wide receiver free agent class that we've seen in several years. So many members of that 2019 draft class, the Deebo Samuels and the DK Metcalfs and the AJ Browns, so many of those players have already been signed to extensions, so they will not be hitting the free agent market. So it's really Jacoby Myers, Juju Smith-Schuster, Alan Lazard, a couple of kind of mid-tier level players. You can easily make the argument that Jacoby Myers is going to be the single best wide receiver available this offseason. Does that price him out of New England? We'll see. He says he wants to stay, but money could talk in that situation.
So far, hitting on they need to get a play caller in the building, keep one of their top playmakers, but get others elsewhere. So we saw Devin McCourty and Matt Slater for a quick hot second in the locker room today. Matt Slater's 37 years old. Devin McCourty's 35. Those guys are future red jacket wearers. I would say golden jackets too. What can you make a read on what their future is? Retirement, returning? Because there's a lot up in the air with those two leaders.
Well, we spoke to both of them after the game yesterday in Buffalo. Neither of them would say one way or the other whether they're planning to retire or whether they're planning to return next season. Reading between the lines of everything that we've seen really since that final home game here against Miami 2 weeks ago, it seems like both of them are going to be done, that they're both going to retire. That's still a little bit of speculation at this point because, again, neither of them has confirmed it. But seeing the emotion that both of them had, seeing the emotion that their teammates had, I mean, David Andrews was asked about both of those players, and he had to step off the podium because he teared up and couldn't even form words. They're just two incredibly respected members of this Patriots organization. Maybe there's a chance they run it back for one more year next year, but I think that's pretty unlikely at this point. I think they both will retire, and that's going to leave a pretty big leadership void on this Patriots team, because those are two players who have been captains for 12 straight years now. They're two of the most respected players in that locker room. That leaves a pretty big hole to fill for the Patriots coming up in 2023.
Yeah, for both those guys, professionals, leaders, as you mentioned, someone you could always talk to in the locker room. But
Yep.
for them to be not a decision maker yet, and considering their families, a lot up in the air. So we're talking about the guys that have been in the building. We talk about the coaches that could come in. Is next season a prove it year in your eyes for Bill Belichick? You have to get these hires right. You have to draft right, and you also have to make these free agent signings. Whatever cap space you have, make them hit as well.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, this is the Patriots' fourth consecutive season without a playoff win. It's the second time in the last 3 years that they failed to even qualify for the playoffs. They have not won a playoff game since Super Bowl 53 against the Los Angeles Rams back in February 2019. And before that, they had made the AFC Championship game in 8 consecutive years. So Robert Kraft is not happy with the product that's been on the field these last couple of years. He made that very clear before this season. He said way back in, I believe it was last March, that he's been bothered by the team's lack of playoff success and expected them to be a contender this year. They certainly were not a contender this year, and he has not kind of shied away from the fact that he's unhappy with the direction of this franchise right now. I do think the Patriots can turn things around and become a contending team again without a full scale kind of overhaul of their entire operation. I think they have a pretty talented roster on both sides of the ball. I think the offense is far more talented than it looked on the field this season. I think if they fix that offensive coaching setup, get in a proven, experienced offensive play caller to lead that whole thing, patch a couple of roster holes. They got to do something at offensive tackle. Ideally, they would go out and get some sort of top elite level pass catcher, because that's one thing that they've lacked that most of the real contending NFL teams have. Obviously, easier said than done. We'll see if they'll be able to do that. And then obviously some questions about some of those free agents, but they don't seem like they're that far away. It seems like this is a team that if they make some of the proper moves this offseason can win double-digit games and be right back into that mix in the AFC next season. But I think that has to happen next season, because if this team goes 5 years in a row without a playoff win, I don't know. I think there's some very serious questions at that point about Bill Belichick's future with this franchise. So we'll see how everything shakes out this offseason, but this is, I believe, a make or break offseason for Bill Belichick.
Robert Kraft is making renovations to the stadium all season long for a reason. He notices when the team gets flexed out of primetime games as well. To wrap it up with this, Zach, if you could describe this season for the Patriots in one word or a quick synopsis, how would you describe it?
Just underwhelming. This seemed like a team that was on the rise last year. That 2021 season seemed like kind of a precursor, not to I don't think anybody expected the Patriots to be a Super Bowl contender this season, but it seemed like they were back on that upward trajectory. Mac Jones looked like a potential franchise quarterback. The Patriots won 10 games. They've got back into the playoffs. They had some talent. They finally have some young talent on this team. And then they just did not take that step forward that so many people were expecting from them. And it just feels like almost a lost season in a lot of regards. They weren't terrible. They weren't awful. They weren't one of the worst teams in the NFL, but they were just mediocre. And that's kind of become the norm for the Patriots over these last couple of seasons. After really 20 years of being dominant, they're just kind of another team now. And again, I think there's some moves that they can make to snap out of that in 2023, but they've been stuck in this kind of holding pattern of mediocrity for far too long now.
And I'm sure you speak on behalf of all Patriots fans sooner rather than later, and really quickly would mean one offseason turnaround to get back to the postseason and winning games. Zach, it's going to be a while since we're back in Gillette. Thanks for all you did this season, man. It was a lot of fun. Shout out to you and Dakota. Next time I talk to you, sounds like draft prep is on the horizon.
Much appreciated, George. Appreciate you as well. Yeah, we'll probably won't be back here. We won't hear from any Patriots players or coaches or management, most likely, until the draft. Yeah, so this is officially in off-season mode for the Patriots, and as you mentioned off the top, far earlier than fans would have liked.
Are you scouting offensive tackles yet or no?
I got to start digging into the tape. I know it's going to be a very exciting pre-draft process of scouring some offensive tackles. Hopefully, we got some wide receivers on there too, though, so we'll get a little bit of excitement there.
Zach, I look forward to it. I'll bug you with that soon, man. Thanks for everything.